Hi everybody. Today I'd like to talk about an aspect of quantum mechanics. Now, before you switch off, please try to understand that quantum mechanics is just a mathematician's way of trying to understand life. And the Great White Brotherhood do exactly the same thing, but they explain it all in words rather than mathematical squiggles on the blackboard. But the object is to explain to people how life works. Not the life that we can see round us, but the weird stuff that's basically invisible, like dimensions and all sorts of things. Dark matter and so on. So I'm going to read to you, if I may, some stuff, it's not terribly long, that I got from the Great White Brotherhood that was actually entitled Fuzziness, in that somebody asked me a question that people that study quantum mechanics have noticed, that the galaxy is actually full of something moving, and they don't really understand what it is. So the Great White Brotherhood explained this amongst several other things. Okay, now, excuse me, I need to explain something about what we would call atoms and so on. To keep it simple, the Great White Brotherhood, when they're talking about atoms, they're referring not only to atoms, but to particles, quarks, and whatever, quarks, bosons, quasars, anything that's basically small and we consider to be somewhat atom-shaped, okay? So when they're using the word atom, please don't attack and say, oh, this is not an atom, blah, blah, blah. It's just a way of explaining something easy to people that are not mathematicians and don't understand this sort of thing. Okay, no, I'm going to read exactly what the Great White Brotherhood gave me about this aspect of quantum mechanics. And I hope that you find it understandable, not too difficult, and hopefully interesting also. So, we begin. Let us consider the effect of this fuzziness in a more down-to-earth fashion. Not everyone understands quantum mechanics, including the mathematicians studying the problem. Zero-point energy is easy to explain if we ignore all the blackboards covered with mathematical hieroglyphics and study spirituality. The only thing that exists is the God force, and that is made of vibrations. Some of these vibrations are quite slow and can be measured. Others are far outside of anything that science can measure at the moment, but one day science will realize that everything is made of or from vibrations, sometimes coming together and forming clumps of frequencies that man observes as all life on planet or in the galaxy. And I got a note here that says, this links with prime radiant, which we'll talk about a bit later. All the different dimensions are formed of vibrations. Now, what they're implying there, that everything that you see around you, including yourself, is just groups of vibrations, these little atom-like things that come together if they've got similar vibrations, and they form something that we call a person, a microphone, a book, whatever, a planet, whatever it might be. So there are two types of vibrations. The first is vibrations that have not combined with anything, and the second is vibrations sufficiently close to each other that they can seem to link together to form all that is observable and all that is unobservable but nevertheless exists. Now, there are atoms that vibrate and form small clumps. These are the atoms that are of a similar frequency and by the law of mutual attraction are drawn towards each other. These atoms might be connected to Earth reality, or they might be invisible in space and are called dark matter. These atoms might remain together for a while, or they might be attracted by the law of mutual attraction that you call gravity, and so leave the original clump and form another clump with similar atoms. The effect is more complicated than that, insofar as each atom is not only alive, but has DNA. DNA is constantly seeking to form something with which it can combine in order to form a living object if it can, either physical or non-physical. Therefore, we have this constant movement of atoms, sometimes forming an object, either minute or huge. We might consider one of the particles that quantum science examines as being an example of something minute, for instance, a quark, or a boson, or a quasar. And a huge planet, or indeed the whole galaxy, as an example of something huge. It makes little or no difference. A small object or a big one are just made of atoms combining due to the law of mutual attraction and due to similar frequencies. As soon as atoms are drawn together, their DNA agrees to work together to form an object if they can. That is the way that life is produced. Not the life force as such, but a manifestation of that life force, which means that, for instance, a human has got a life force, but we also have a body. And the life force is separate from the body, as you probably know, and the body is made of countless atoms drawn by the law of mutual attraction because they're of similar vibration, similar frequency, and so they form a body, or a cat, or a dog, or a horse, or a rabbit, or whatever it might be, a plant, and so on. Okay? Now, they're going to talk about zero-point energy. Zero-point energy is caused through the difference between clumps of different sizes. Each atom contains a vast amount of energy, as a nuclear bomb can demonstrate. Science only uses certain types of atoms, but all atoms contain exactly the same amount of energy as all is one. The energy of a small clump would be less than the energy contained within a large clump due to the fact that there are more atoms in one clump than in another. The energy known as zero-point energy can be released if we can persuade one atom to quit its clump and smash into a different clump. So imagine an atom coming from this clump of a group of frequencies and bashing into another group of atoms of a totally different frequency. It can be achieved by measuring the frequency of one clump and then bombarding a second clump with the frequency of the first, which is what I said. If we can find out what the frequency of this clump is, and bombard a totally separate clump with an atom, there will be energy released, as it goes on to explain. This causes the second clump, that's this one, to be disturbed as its quiescent frequency is bombarded with a foreign frequency, and the second atom, because you're taking one atom which will hit another one atom. So where was I? And the second atom literally explodes as it cannot contain two frequencies at the same time. And that energy released we call 0-point energy. But nothing can be destroyed. So the atom reforms and joins the first clump. Let me go on and it'll become obvious what they're talking about here. The answer is that surrounding the atom is a cloud of matter about which man knows little, but this cloud of matter contains the life force, the life plan, and the DNA of the atom. All those things are not contained within the atom, but are in association with the atom, sort of surrounding it, if you like. So as soon as the atom releases its energy, these outside forces spring into action and draw from the cosmic field whatever is required to reform that atom. That is why atoms cannot be destroyed. Their life force, etc., reforms it. What is the cosmic field? It is a spiritual force that is everywhere that we have not yet discussed. And we, of course, is the Great White Brotherhood. Imagine it as a reserve of energy that is everywhere. This energy is also vibration, but is so fashioned that its frequency can be easily modified to match the frequency of any other atom or particle. So it restores that atom and balance is restored. The fuzziness that was mentioned is caused by the vast number of atoms jumping from one clump to another. Now, when they say that, they're not talking about this what was it they call it, quantum energy. Hang on, I'm hopeless at all this. 0-point energy. Now, what they're saying is that an atom can leave one clump and join another clump, but that clump would have to have a similar frequency to the first clump. If it was a foreign frequency, it wouldn't be attracted to it. It has to be bombarded in order to create 0-point energy. But nevertheless, throughout the entire galaxy, there's zillions of these atoms leaping about all over the place, trying to find a home, if you like, trying to find the best possible match to itself. So it finds one clump, and if it's not satisfied with that, it will shoot off and hit another clump and find out if that's more suitable. If that's not suitable, it will whiz off somewhere else and find yet another clump. Okay, and it keeps doing that, and the whole galaxy is full of these atoms flying about, which is called this fuzziness that quantum mathematicians have noticed and scratched their heads about. Okay, now, none of this is connected to the light force of God, which is a spiritual force that exists but could not be measured by science. It is the light of or from God, and it is pure starlight. I'll jump that bit because they're saying that all these different frequencies have actually got nothing to do with the God force, which is a totally different force. So there's no point in going on with that little bit. While we're on the subject of matter, let us mention briefly antimatter. As all must be kept in balance, for every particle of matter, there is an equal quantity of antimatter. However, antimatter is carefully contained within a coating of thick gravity, as the effects of matter and antimatter colliding would be unfortunate, to say the least. Antimatter is quite simply floating around in the space between any two atoms molecules or particles of matter. Each piece of matter has a coating of gravity outside it, as does each piece of antimatter. Science has difficulty in studying antimatter, as science is based on appreciation of what is going on in our world of matter, but antimatter is there awaiting to be studied. The reason that a collision between matter and antimatter would be so dramatic is that if two particles of matter and antimatter were to collide, they would cancel each other out, thus releasing the energy in both particles. Now, there's another little bit that I'll read to you that's related to all this, and it's not very long. What we were referring to is one atom of one frequency bombarding a clump of atoms of a different frequency. They're talking about this, what's it called? Oh, good heavens. I'm sorry, I'm so hopeless. 0-point energy. They're talking about 0-point energy. What we were referring to is one atom of one frequency bombarding a clump of atoms of a different frequency, and one of those second atoms, in a way, combining with the first atom, and it is this change that causes the second atom to explode. The first atom is also destroyed in the process, and the resulting energy released is called 0-point energy. So each time effectively, two atoms are destroyed. The first being the bullet atom, and the second, the target atom. Okay, you can understand that, can't you? If you can shoot an atom out from a thing vibrating at one frequency and it hits an atom vibrating at a different frequency, they both explode, and that produces energy. The trick is to send constantly a stream of atoms of one frequency at a target of a different frequency, thus causing a closely knit series of explosions that can be harvested and used. The reforming process, when they were talking about this life force and everything, tries to create the atom as it was before. The reforming process is so rapid that this process can carry on indefinitely, almost if one atom was being used to bang against another, endlessly. This is 0-point energy. Then there's a little note, not very long, about antimatter once again. Antimatter is a substance that contains the glue of an alternative reality. We have not spoken about this, but our reality has a counterpart, a sort of negative version of our reality, rather like two faces of a playing cards, or the two sides of a coin, heads and tails. This alternative reality is a long study in its own right, and one that we will discuss eventually. We will not say more at the moment. Now, there's just a short page to do with something called prime radiant. I don't know if you've ever heard of prime radiant, but it explains it. Prime radiant is the concept that all that exists in physicality is one point of life whizzing around at such speed and with such freedom that it creates all that we see in the universe. Now, what that means is there's one atom, if you like, and it whizzes round the universe, the whole universe, at incredible speed, such that it appears almost to cross itself sometimes. As it's going round, it does it so quickly, it will come back to itself and appear to almost to create a second point, and it go around and create a third point. And That, believe it or not, is what creates everything that you see in our whole galaxy. It's doing it at such speed, this one tiny point of life is going around at such speed that it's creating everything that you can see, not only planet Earth, not only every blade of grass, of every animal, of every grain of sand, of every person, but every planet, every star, everything in the whole universe, all being created instantly from this one tiny point of life. It's difficult to believe, but it's apparently so. Now, this is true, but the story is a lot more complicated than that, in that there is a prime radiant for every person alive. Each and every person has his version of prime radiant, which operates under the control of his consciousness, forming the universe in which he lives. That is why no two people have identical lives. In other words, you probably understood, but what they're saying is that for every person alive on the planet Earth at the moment, I think there's about 7 billion people, there's 7 billion prime radiants all whooshing about, creating the universe exclusive to that one person. Each person has a unique aspect whizzing round, creating what he sees and appreciates. It may be difficult to imagine that you create a universe that is unique to you, but it is further complicated by the fact that, by common agreement, people can join their thoughts and agree to create similar universes or parts of universes in order to try to make sense of life. But even that is not always quite the same. We have stated that, in the case of a crime, if the police ask witnesses what they saw, the descriptions can vary widely. This is because we all create our versions of life and so may not all see the same thing. We might all see a crime, but do not all see the same event. Now it stops there, and I'm going to stop there. I could go on, but already what I've explained to you, unless you're familiar with these concepts, is very difficult to understand. And you might wonder why I've bothered to try and explain all this to you. It's because as we go through this unfolding process that's called ascension, it's important to understand as much about life as we can. So we need to look at these aspects of life that quantum mechanics mathematicians study and try to understand that they are actual real events in a real world as far as we're concerned. And if we can understand it in basic language, it will help us progress through the ascension process. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me. I hope it wasn't too boring or too confusing. It's actually quite important to understand all this stuff. And so I'll come back and speak to you again on another topic, another day. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below this video, and I'll do my best to answer any queries you may have. Okay, so until next time, thank you once again for watching, and I'll speak to you another day. Bye.